The July 18th, 2023 City of Ways and Means Committee is now called to order. I will call on Councilmember Mitchell for our invocation. Councilmember Mitchell.
Let us bow our head in silence. You remember everyone here in the community who's less fortunate than we are, and all this heat that we are going through, and hopefully be safe. Amen.
Amen. Item 2, the minutes for June 2023 has been deferred. Okay. And while we're talking about changes, there are a couple of other ones that I think we need to be mindful of. I know most of you got the July 13th memo from Matt Fountain regarding 2 items that we want to make slight amendments to. Matt, you want to explain it? I can explain it from your text message. Why don't you come up and explain what the changes are? They're pretty minor. Did everyone get that email from Matt?
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. We have a minor change on item 12, where we had on the council agenda the $949,900 professional services contract with Hazen and Sawyer for the MUSC pump station. This is as part of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer funded project where the Corps is contributing $3 million towards the outfit of this pump station. Still a professional service contract, still with Hazen and Sawyer, a very slightly lower contract amount as per the email, and we switched from a lump sum approach to a time and expense approach. And then, I'm sorry, on item 14, thank you, Jennifer. On item 14, the approval to accept the grant award from the South Carolina Office of Resilience for Barbary Woods from their ACIP funding. This is the $4.6 million grant. We just replaced Appendix D, which was a line item breakdown of project costs, with a updated version that was a slightly clearer breakdown of those project costs. So very, very minor change on that one.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So when we get to those 2 items, they will be as amended. Okay, let's go through bids and purchases.
Move for approval.
Any discussion on items 3A through 3D? Yes, council member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did reach out to Mr. Altop, but just throwing this out there, y'all, on the 3B. Not a big deal, but since we're purchasing these, would y'all agree that putting some tint on these trucks, if they aren't already there, might be helpful for our employees?
Put some what? Tint?
Tint.
I thought you said tint.
Tint, T-I-N-T.
I'm not sure. I mean, that's something.
I don't
that-
think Mr.
yeah,
Altop's here, but
I mean,
is that
that's
something that you all might?
That's something that we might want to discuss with Acting Chief
Okay.
Walker.
All right,
at
thank
some
you.
point. Okay.
Yes, I am here.
Any other questions or issues with respect to bids and purchases? All in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. Item 4. Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the approval to accept the award for the 2023 Healthcare Preparedness Program? Been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item 5.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the budget, finance, and revenue collections item? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item 6. Moved and properly second. This is for the approval to accept an award under the SDPS program. It's something that we do annually. All in favor say aye. Oh, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Okay. Okay. Item 7. Oh, yeah. All in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. Thanks. item 7. No, item 8, isn't it? 7, okay. Item 7, budget and finance. Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Yes, I'm sorry. I have to look your way. Yes, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I'd really like if we could take a look at the ARPA funds. Not exactly sure why we decided to, I went back and watched I think it was the ad hoc budget committee. I don't think a ton of conversation was had onto why we are, allocating these funds right now to what we are. I know I'd like to have further discussion on it. I don't know how all of you feel. Right now, so we have 4.5. 1.7 is going to the Beresford Creek Bridge, which understandably is something we need to do. I'm not sure if we have other funding or if we've been, putting money away for that until now, but obviously that money needs to be spent on that. But the other items, I'd like to have, further discussion over $2 million. Is there a reason that the ad hoc budget committee decided upon those items? Is there a rush? Is there a reason? Can we have further discussion? These funds don't have to be allocated until December 24 and spent by December 26th.
Sure, Mayor.
Respond, kind of generally speaking, you never know what might happen up in Washington, DC. And there've been a number of requests in the Congress that ARPA funds be reeled back or brought back or something like that. And honestly, it's been a little bit of a concern of mine that we go ahead and at least get our allocations done so that we have specific projects lined up for the balance of our funding. Now, to speak on the individual requests, I'd love to do that as well, because they're all good things and things that we need to do. The first one is the $100,000 for the Union Pier reset. I think we all concur, and thankfully we won't be here all night tonight because we won't have Union Pier on our
You just jinxed it.
did I jinx it?
Yes, you did.
I'm sorry. Can I take that back?
No.
Can I eat that? Okay. Okay, we may be here a while tonight, but we won't be here as long as we would have been otherwise. I can assure you that.
Right.
So our planning department needs some funding to do that comprehensive planning for make sure that Union Pier fits in with the rest of the city historic district. And so we needed some funding for that. The Hope Center, as you may know, is to help offer wraparound services for our citizens who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness. And we operate a center already, but we already bought property to build a permanent facility. And LS3P, God bless them, they are donated the design services. They will soon be complete, I think, in the next few months and moving towards getting us a permit. It's about a $6 million investment, and we've raised privately about half of the money through charitable donations. I think around 3 million of the total is privately given to us. So this completes the funding so that we would be able to break ground, I think, early next year in first quarter of 24 and get this thing done. The James Lewis Incubator site has been on our radar for some time. As you probably know, that building is well under construction, and we plan for an entrepreneurial resource center there on the ground floor where you can't have residential. Now, the developer that we're partnering with basically allowed us to use that space, but we had to pay for the upfit of it to build it out. And so that's what this funding is for. And the timing of that is it's under construction right now. And we hope to have that completed first quarter of next year or late this year. And so time is kind of on the essence on the incubator site funding. So, and the Beresford Creek Bridge you mentioned already, we've got a contract already signed to replace the bridge. We're moving forward and this completes the funding for that. I guess we were kind of waiting to know what the exact cost of the bridge would be. So respectfully, these are all good things. And the ARPA funding allows us to complete these without having to pull the funding from somewhere else. And I did have that concern about if we didn't go ahead and get allocated and make plans for the money, you know, something might happen to it.
Any follow-up? Yes, council member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree, they're all good things. I just, you know, obviously prioritizing things like stormwater, $1 million can go a long way there as well. So we can allocate it to other places, but if this is where, you know, I know I can feel I don't have support to defer this and have further discussion on where to allocate these funds, but I wish that we had a little more conversation as far as where these funds should be allocated. So, thank you.
Did you have any specific suggestions?
Certainly, I think some should go to stormwater for some of our maintenance needs, you know, that haven't been met. There are obviously probably small projects that we don't have funding for yet, or we're are needing funds. You know, I can't speak to a specific project. I mean, I can give you a list of James Island things that you can give the money to. If you'd like them to go there. But again, I just think that we could wiggle that money, spread the wealth, so to speak. And again, if that's I understand now the why you're hurrying, you know, as far as not wanting to lose those dollars, but I certainly think that there are other avenues that the money could go to.
Yes, Councilmember Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's not forget, there's $30 million in ARPA funds that are going to stormwater projects in West Ashley, James Island. So it's not this specific pot of money, but certainly significant amount of funding from the federal legislation is going to stormwater in all of our districts. And that's due in large measure to some great work by our legislative delegation, our staff here. I think, you know, Central Park Basin's getting some funding. You know, we read it off at a couple meetings ago, some of the projects that are being funded through that. So when you look at it in totality, I think some of those concerns are addressed.
And I'm not sure whether or not there are any restrictions on use of the funds.
There are.
Mhm.
I think it's stormwater project. I do believe the stormwater project would qualify. But to Councilmember Rappel's point, I mean, we applied through the state for ARPA funding for some of the flooding projects. The $10 million we got for Hughie and King Street was ARPA funding. And then in addition to that, thanks to Councilmember Rappel's request to Representative Leon Stavronakis, we got an extra $2 million for Windermere, extra $2 million for Wapu DuPont drainage basin. We're accepting $4 million tonight for Johns Island project. So you know, you add it all up and then what Charleston Water Service got as well for work they're doing. We've been using a good bit of ARPA funding from other sources for drainage. Now, the small projects, I know it's going to take one more year, but every small project that we've identified right now, we have, including next year's budget, I think we're fully funded, aren't we, Matt, on all of our small projected projects at this point? If you count the 24 budget that we already anticipate. So we're working on those.
And Mayor, also $10 million for the Earhart Tunnel. and
That
the
was
various
CD
basins, CDBG dollars.
That's right.
So there are other resources going toward it. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand, gentlemen, and I'll see you and I'll raise you streets, sidewalks, other improvements that we could use those for as well. So we don't have to just stop at stormwater. I don't want to get into who gets what, James Island, West Ashley Peninsula, so I know how much they get. And we're certainly at the bottom of those thresholds. But we don't have to get into that tonight. Again, I was just pointing out that, you know, I don't think we didn't have to decide at that ad hoc budget meeting to spend the 4.5, but y'all did. I just think there should have been further discussion, and I certainly think that there are other projects in the city that we could have spread the wealth to. So I'll end it with that. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, I understand your point, certainly about use it or lose it, in particular as we approach year end. The appropriation to Daniel Island and some of the other ones certainly makes sense. But how much does it really hurt us to wait 30 days and have a little bit more discussion on that? I mean, how much does it really hurt us? I mean, it really doesn't. I would be an advocate of that, you know. There may be some small, in particular, smaller projects that we may have wanted to get funded that didn't come up in that budget ad hoc committee meeting. So
Okay, I mean,
that's the
knowing,
purpose in bringing it to the body of the whole. I mean,
Sure.
ad hoc isn't the body of the whole.
I
Ways and
mean,
means is.
agree, as long as we know that if we do, we'll have to get the money from somewhere else.
I
to
mean, we
complete
already have
these
a
projects.
proposal with the, you know, with the, okay,
Yeah.
good.
So I just want to remind everybody, the Bearsford Creek, we've already approved, council already
Right,
approved to
right.
use those funds for the Bearsford Creek Bridge. The comprehensive plan, we just reallocated from above. That's not new money that we've allocated. It was something that was approved for a different source before that we moved into that. So that's not new funding. And then obviously the James Lewis, like we said, we've been talking for a couple of years about using the funds for those two purposes, the Hope Center and the James E. Lewis incubator site. So that's why we allocated the additional funds to those projects, sorry. And they don't have funding attached to them right now. So like Councilmember Gregory said, we would have to find funding. And my more concern would be James Lewis since it's imminent.
Well, let me ask this, since you got the totals right there, obviously the Bearsford Creek Bridge, the James Lewis and the Navigation Center. What is that total? What are they?
So it's 1 point, yeah. That's probably 5 million.
Out of what?
Whoops, sorry, I'm sorry. 4 million out of the, yeah. So if you just take the 100,000. 4.4, yeah. It's 4.4 million of that is for those three projects,
And what would be left?
100,000.
Oof.
But really, that 100,000 is already allocated from something above. So we really only had the 4.4 additional dollars to allocate. We reallocated the 100,000 from something that was approved before.
So the money's spent.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, that is what it's, the Bearsford Creek is off the table.
Oh,
because
I
you already
understand.
approved
Got
that.
bids and all of
So,
that,
I mean, if
right,
you want to
yeah.
discuss the other two projects, just understand that we have to find the funding somewhere else.
Well, we got budget cycle coming up, right?
Yes,
Soon, okay. No, I mean, I think we go forward with this. and
I just
we-
want to remind you about Bearsford.
August, we'll be coming up on the new budget for next year. Let's get some of those small projects then, Council Lady Parker, if we could.
Councilmember Parker, let's get together and identify some James Island projects, okay? All right. Yes,
I'm happy to discuss
Right.
funding for any project you got in mind. I'm seriously,
Mhm.
these are all really great things for our city to do. We've been talking about them for years. We do have some other sources of income. Tell me what you need to fund. Let's talk about it, okay?
Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, let me be clear again, gentlemen, this is really just about how the funding was allocated. Okay, wasn't brought to the body, it was brought to ad hoc committee.
Ready for the question? All in favor, we're talking about item 7. Say aye. The ayes have it.
Nay.
Item 1 nay. Item 8. Moved and properly second. Any discussion on item 8? If not, all in favor say aye. Item 9. Stormwater management. Okay. Moved and properly second that we're vote on item 9. All in favor say aye. The ayes have it. Item 10.
Move for approval.
Can I
Yes.
just really quick on item 9, you might recall, not last meeting, the meeting before, we showed all those really cool pictures of the brick arches and all the restoration work.
Yes.
Item 9 is the continuation of that. If you drive up Cumming Street today, you'll see all the work going on. Thank you. These projects have really worked. When we had that crazy storm last Monday morning, I don't know if you'll remember, because it really hit West Ashley hard. I was coming across the bridge from Mount Pleasant into downtown about 8 o'clock when they hit, and went down to Limehouse Street, which was the first part of the project that we did south of Wentworth. And the water was flowing out of there into the harbor. I mean, it was crazy how good it was. That project is working. It's incredible use of our dollars, and thank you for your support for this. It's made a huge difference. So hopefully we will continue to go. I see Matt Fountain back there. Matt, thanks for your hard work and your team on it. It's made a big difference, big difference. So
I
people
think so.
would get to work, to hospital, everyone needed to go on Monday morning. They never could have done that before. We had a storm like that.
We really need to thank Matt and his team
Yeah,
for coming
they've done
up
a
with
great
that
job.
idea.
And providing us incredibly cool pictures.
Yes. Okay, any,
So-
yes,
so-
Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, and just to mention that project or that process, because there's more of those tunnels that need to be cleaned out and rehabbed, that we've requested $5 million from the federal government through our partnership with the Corps of Engineers to be able to continue that work. And I just thought I would mention that. We expect for them to look at that favorably. Thank you.
All right. All in favor of item 9? Yes, council member.
I'm gonna tag on here. So I don't know if you saw the bid sheet, but $800 for every linear foot of tunnel. So I mean, that adds up real quick. For every 12 inches of tunnel, it costs $800 to rehab it. So $5 million doesn't go a long way with $800 a foot.
Yes, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for saying that. I was just curious. So we're just upping. Do we have the contract yet? Because I mean, we're ultimately upping it another $500,000. So it's just, I mean, the threshold, but we know it's going to cost another $500,000.
So these are the indefinite delivery contract, task order contracts. They're existing contracts. Under the previous procurement threshold, they were only allowed to be a maximum allocation of $500,000 in a given calendar year. When council adjusted the procurement threshold to increase that to allow up to 750, we are increasing these then to match that 750,000. Of course, we can only spend that money if we have council allocated budget available in order to do that work.
Okay. And you're telling me that's a lot per square foot for 12?
You can spend a lot of money very quickly at $800. It's a reasonable price. Both the bids came in at a reasonable price.
Okay.
And they're fairly close, but if you think about that.
Yeah.
Extrapolate that out of all the brick arch tunnels that we have in the city, that money gets spent very quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Appel.
I mean, sometimes when you do infrastructure underground, you got to do what's right, even if it's not perfectly economical and the free market wouldn't do it. I'm glad we're doing this project.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman,
Not sure what-
so
what's there.
the math is that the 5 million we've requested from the feds will do 6,250 feet, well over a mile. We've spent to date just by allocating year to year, a few million here, a few million there. I think we're probably up to 4 or 5 million now to date since we started, because we've come a good mile up Cumming Street from the low battery, haven't we? Something like that ballpark.
We have,
Yeah.
I'd have to double check the exact numbers. I think it's 3 to 4 million. There's a little bit of section that had already been
Yeah.
lined, and of course it varies. I mean, depending on what we encounter for
Okay.
conditions, but that's a good estimate for square
And
footage.
some of
linear footage.
the tunnels, like sections of it, lower Meeting Street and lower King Street, have been functional for some time. It's when you get away from the battery that they need the rehab. And that's where you get the bang for your buck. It's because, the water can travel that distance and you get storage added as well, because there's a lot of storage down there. So, anyway, yeah, I think we'll end up, with still another 4 or 5 miles to go, but we're just eating the elephant one bite at a time.
Mr.
Any
Chairman,
more questions or discussions, Councilman Waring?
it does make economic sense. If you don't fix these brick arches, you have streets caving in. You have neighborhoods flooding. You couldn't get around on the peninsula. What's the economic cost of streets caving in and lack of transportation being effective in a peninsula city? It is cost effective to do.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Item 11. Budget, finance, and revenue collections. Approved. Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Okay. And item 12 is amended. Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in. Moved and properly seconded. All in favor? The ayes have it. Item 13.
With approval.
Okay. Any, do I hear a second? Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Item 14 as amended.
Move for approval as amended.
Okay. Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. The Carter budget for 24.
Move for approval.
Do I hear a second? Moved and properly seconded. Discussion, council member.
Thank you, Mr.
Sipping.
Chairman and fellow council members. Just briefly, as you all are, I'm sure painfully are at this point, I'm very honored to serve as the chairman of CARTA. With me today is Ron Mitchum, our executive director. I'm going to turn over to him for a couple minutes if you all don't have any objection. But before I do, I just want to let you know, I got elected to this seat 13 and a half years ago now. And the first thing that happened to me, back then it was punishment, by the way, is I was appointed to the CARTA board. And I can just tell you, we have really come a long way. If you looked at your packet and looked at the budget that's being presented to you tonight for approval as one of the member districts within the CARTA area, our budget's upwards of $25 million. We're in the process of replacing our fleet from the oldest fleet in America to a battery electric fleet that we've resolved as a board to completely replace over 100 buses by 2040. We're going to meet that and probably exceed it. And recently, you may have read about this, got some press because everybody in the world took credit for it. We got a $26 million grant that we're going to use to rebuild our, what we call our intermodal facility, to buy more battery electric buses and to team up with Trident Tech to educate people in the world of battery electric technology and vehicle maintenance. So keeping up with the things that are going to be happening around. So it's not your quiet general CARTA anymore. We operate on a balanced budget. We're a big business. We just changed our service provider, which is really good news. We've already seen some great improvement in on-time service and the like. So, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Mitchum just very briefly for presentation.
Oh, he'll be able to add.
He's going to add just very quickly, so
Okay.
you all see where we are and we'll answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, it's a pleasure to be with you all this evening, and I'm not sure I have a whole lot to add. Kevin's done a pretty good job. He's well schooled in what we're doing. I will comment that it is a slight increase in operations. We do have a new contract operator. We had some performance issues we were starting to see with our old contractor, so we went out and did what we should have done and got us a new contractor who's focused on performance. So that increase you see in operation is primarily related to increase in driver pay. Obviously, we're just like everybody else. We're competing for those CDL drivers on a daily basis, so we need to be competitive with pay. So That's primarily what you see there. You do see an increase in capital. That relates to the construction of the parking lot at the Mount Pleasant Street parcel, which is next to Joseph Floyd Manor. So that'll start occurring this fiscal year. And this is the fiscal year that begins October 1st. So we're on a federal fiscal year, but we do have to receive approval of our budget by all our member governments, which is why you see me in July. It takes me a little bit of time to get around to everybody. I will point out that one thing that might cause you some concern as you look at that is the loss of state mass transit funds. Those are state funds that we receive as part of the fuel tax. A quarter of a penny goes to the DOT to use as matching funds for federal transit dollars. So our share is, it goes up and down a little bit depending on revenues on that particular funding source, but was projected to be $660,000. We obviously participate with our colleagues around the state looking at transit issues and operational issues, et cetera. There were a number of them that were having trouble spending all the federal money because they didn't have enough local money to match. But we obviously have the benefit of local money here through the sales tax. So I propose that we do a swap, that we would give up our state mass transit funds, which they could use in turn to provide to some of those agencies to make their match. And in turn, we would get $2 federal dollars for every one of those state dollars we gave up, which we could then turn match with our state, our local sales tax. So instead of $660,000, we'll get $1.3 million. So we felt like that was a pretty good deal. And we'll get that over a 3-year period. So the fact that that went down, don't be concerned because we're actually going to see a boost back into the budget. The budget will get adjusted in being transparent because that $26 million announcement that the chairman mentioned is not reflected because this budget was approved before that announcement came from the feds. So you won't see all of it, obviously, in 1 year. It'll take us a little while to finish the design and do the construction, et cetera. But obviously, we'll build some of that back into the budget to cover the expenses that occur. One other thing I want to point out to you while I'm here is we are in the middle of doing a peninsula study, looking at the service we provide on the peninsula. Obviously, you have a lot of new development, a lot of new residential and commercial stuff going on that we're not currently serving. We understand, recognize that. So what we wanted to do was take a look at that, to try to figure out how we could better serve that with our existing service as well as expanding service. So we'll probably be coming back to you after the first of the year to talk about what that study showed us and to talk about the things that we're looking and thinking about doing. I guess the last thing I would point out is we are in the middle of rebranding Carta, moving away from the old dark green and gold, sometimes yellow circle C, and some brighter colors. And that was primarily something we were doing in response to something that the drivers and the passengers asked for. A lot of those dark green signs, particularly in the suburban areas, tended to bleed in with the trees. And so occasionally drivers were missing people because they didn't see them standing there. They were wearing dark clothes and the sign, they just kind of, missed them completely. So they wanted something a little bit more vibrant to keep them focused on the fact that they're stop approaching and to make sure that they made sure to get somebody if they're there. Plus, it's just sort of time to refresh that brand. So it is what we call sort of a slow, low rollout. And we're doing that so that we can do it as efficiently as possible when it comes to money. We could have obviously went out and spent a ton of money and changed everything overnight, but that would have cost us a lot of money. And that's just not how we operate these days. So you'll start to see that transition on the vehicles, on the signage, on everything that we do. You'll start to see those new colors. So
Will the advertisement continue on those buses?
yes,
Yes.
sir. Let's
How much revenue do you get from that?
probably over $1 million a year, roughly. Yeah, it's a little much for me some days. I figure we've got every lawyer in town represented. And it is a little bit of a concern. Every time we have an accident, I feel like people just say, well, let me call George. Even if it's not our fault. But it is a good revenue source. And, if the board chooses to do something different, obviously we would do that, but.
And political ads are restricted, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We do have advertising on the inside, so we have smaller scale stuff. Chairman mentioned earlier in the Transportation Committee, we were doing something with the City Police Department about Heads Up, which is pedestrian awareness. So some of that's inside the buses, so that's a little bit less of a cost. But yeah, the law firms are competing heavily for that bus space these days. can't say I'm excited about that. I'd like to see some other stuff. And we do have a few, we have Patriots Point in USC and a few like that, but would like to see a little bit more variety there.
Just really quickly, Mr. Chairman, we do, by the way, have one of our buses completely wrapped with heads up on the outside.
Yes, sir.
And just so the committee knows and council knows, we have a long-term MOU between CARTA and the city to fund the downtown shuttle. So
Okay.
you can get on and off for free,
But
but
that-
we still have to allocate the monies every year. So a part of this approval is allocating those monies for the dash system downtown.
What was that, 600,000?
I think I forget what year we're in. It's almost 700,000.
Right.
I see my bidding in the back there from his one, but high end of
Okay.
600s.
Okay. Thanks for all you do.
Yep. Happy to answer any questions you might have. And as always, if anytime you want to come visit the facility, check out buses, whatever you want to do, we certainly welcome you.
Okay. It's kind of hard to see the heads up signs if your head's down.
That's correct.
Okay, council member Appel.
Can we get a vote, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right. All in favor of the Carter 2024 budget, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Chairman Appel.
So I was in a mediation yesterday, so I didn't preside over the real estate committee. I don't even know who, frankly. I haven't caught up. Peter did. Okay, great. Well-oiled machine here.
He's not joining virtually, so is there anyone else who wanted to? Well, there.
Did I hear a second? I think Councilman Waring
Yeah,
wanted
I
to.
was at the meeting.
Thank you.
All items, I think we probably need to take one separately, which created a good bit of debate, and that was the property off of Bees Ferry Road, item C. So all other items passed unanimous, and I move approval for all other items except C.
And was Swallow Drive, was that deferred as well? I believe that Brittany was at that meeting. I think she said that one was deferred. Christopher, is that? Thank you.
They were deferred, right? Right.
Right.
Okay,
Well, with those exceptions.
all right. So we are going to be voting on 16A through I, with the exception of C and that's it.
And all the annexations.
And the annexations as well. And two were deferred. 3 and 6.
Right.
Okay, all right. Do I hear a motion?
So second.
Moved and properly seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Now let's get back to C. Okay,
Item C was an issue that Councilman Shealy rose, and I think I ought to yield over to Councilman Shealy.
Okay.
Councilman Shuey.
Does anybody want to make a presentation before or not? I don't know on what we've got. I mean, I don't mind starting, but if they wanted to make their presentation.
I guess that's a good
Yeah.
idea, just to set it up,
Sure.
you know.
So everybody knows what's going on.
Knows
Yes,
what we're talking about.
Certainly.
Ms. Shaw Johnson.
Good afternoon. So what is before you as indicated item C on the real estate committee is the acquisition of 17 acres of land on Verdier Street in the West Ashley community. A little over 14 of that is 14.593 is high acres. So what we requested of the real estate committee is to allow for the purchase of that property for the development of both affordable and workforce housing in the city of Charleston. The acquisition cost itself is $5,107,550. And the appraised value of that property is $5,250,000. The property is located in a PUD And so as part of the acquisition and approval of the purchase and sales agreement, we would be seeking an amendment to that PUD to allow for this to be converted to residential versus commercial use. And one of the things that we did in contemplating and looking at this site is reach out most recently to our council members, West Ashley, to share our desire to acquire this. We've been working with Bridge Commercial, who is the Realtor firm that won the request for proposal several years ago. And we've been working with them probably over a year and a half, almost 2 years, looking to buy property for the advancement of affordable and workforce housing in the city of Charleston. Based on an engineer's schematic, and more work is needed there, but we anticipate the development of 124 homes there. Again, our goal would be to build both multifamily rental, around 72 units, and then the balance of that, about 52 units, would be a for sale product for first-time home buyers. And typically those persons are earning around the 120% AMI level. As you all are aware, our comprehensive plan advises that we need 16,351 units by the end of the decade. The West Ashley community, which needs the most, requires 6,353 units. And so essentially, we want to acquire this property to advance and meet or help meet that goal, because certainly this one property won't meet the entirety of that goal. One of the things that we looked at in response to some of the concerns raised by a council member, Shealy in particular, for this site, the conversion of the site from commercial to residential would reduce traffic concerns by 25%. That came from an expert, an engineer, not directly from me. The property is not next door to the landfill. It is about a mile and a quarter away. And Christopher Morgan, who is our planning manager, will share some other schematics and information he has to give you a better visual of that. This property is certainly located close to a number of amenities, which makes it a viable location for folks who want to live in the West Ashley community. In addition to that, and I'll wait until Christopher brings up his docs, but there will also be close to this particular site, I believe on the corner, the seller would like to have
Excuse me, can you
Sure.
bring it up now? So as you talk, we can. Thank you, Christopher.
So this is the engineer's conceptual layout. This is a first blush layout of the site. Bees Ferry Road is the road running left to right, and the road that goes to development to the rear is in the middle. And then there's another road up the upper right corner that comes to the signal that's at Sanders Road there. And then you see some of the other development to the rear beyond some marsh area there. Then we have a little bit broader view. This shows the site here, some of the nearby uses, things like that. Also the fact that there is a biped facility along Bees Ferry there that goes all the way down Bees Ferry, all the way to the Ashley River biped facility. It also connects with what will be future sidewalks that lead down Sanders to the schools off Sanders Road, the West Ashley High School, the middle school, the library. You also have 2 grocery stores within a mile. You have bus routes within a mile, things like that. The question about the landfill, we did do a measurement through our GIS. The closest any of the units would be to any part of the active landfill is 1,800 feet. And there are hundreds of units to the northwest that are much closer to the landfill than that. Not that that's ideal, but this site will have a good bit of distance from that landfill site.
Do it to the middle of the landfill instead of to the edge, but okay.
And yeah, this
Go
is a
ahead.
measurement to the edge of the landfill because that's.
Yeah,
a
not
detention
the
pond.
closest point. Go
Right.
ahead.
So, and these were really the slides that I had that, we were gonna show unless there were other questions.
And so the other concern, and I don't have an answer to address this concern that was brought forward in the real estate committee meeting, is that this property is in the Church Creek TIF district. I did ask our finance department, but it was very late in the day when I asked that question regarding how much money is in that TIF to date. We don't have an answer for that, but hopefully this one site would not adversely impact the ability of that TIF to accumulate the dollars that mayor and council anticipated. And again, I simply remind us of the need for affordable and workforce housing in our community, hence our desire to purchase the site. Thank you.
Okay, we're open for discussion. Councilman,
Thank you. I did a lot of due diligence today, spent most of my day doing that after being challenged by staff to make sure that my comments in the real estate committee meeting were correct, although I was told they were not correct. So let me tell you a little bit about that. First of all, Michelle Johnson said that she reached out to council members in West Ashley. I was reached out to just before the agenda went out on Wednesday. Well, it was Wednesday morning, I guess, that I was reached out to. That's the first I had heard of this before it came on our agenda. This property, as you can see, is very close to the Charleston County landfill. When I used a Google map, 1,800, it's not, if you go to the closest point, it's about 1,500, but it's still, it's a pretty close proximity, much closer than 1.5 miles that our staff tried to convince it was 1.5 miles to 2 miles away. This is certainly a lot closer than that. There have been multiple complaints this year. You may have seen it on the news, but there's been multiple complaints about littering of trash in yards, garbage, wastewater runoff into yards, and damage to property and damage to cars due to that landfill. DHEC gave that landfill a failing grade earlier this year. So I called DHEC this morning as part of my due diligence. I talked to Ms. Boswell this morning. She let me know because I was told, Mr. Morgan said, well, it's only the people right up next to the landfill that are making these complaints. I said, so I told her that. I asked her and she said, well, she said those complaints were coming mostly from the Bees Landing neighborhood, which is not that same neighborhood, and that they are near and around our Bees Landing recreation facility. So you can see back on that map that is about a mile. In fact, we have it listed as 1 mile away, where the Bees Landing recreation facility is about 1 mile from here. So most of those complaints are much further than this site is. So what's happening is you've got birds like turkey vultures, seagulls, hawks, and bald eagles, she said, that are taking stuff off this landfill and dumping it in people's yards on people's properties. So since we had mentioned our recreation site, I picked up, as soon as I hung up with DHEC, I called Laura Yarbrough, our recreation director, and I said, have we had issues with this? And she said, Councilman Shealy, you're going to see soon on your Ways and Means Committee that we're going to need to replace our scoreboards in our at Bees Landing because the vultures have torn up our scoreboards and we've got to buy new scoreboards. She also described, some of you that have been around baseball know that there's a rim around the outfield fence, a plastic rim that goes around. We're going to have to replace those too because the vultures have torn that up. So, looking back, had we known this, would we have bought a property that close to the landfill? It's just a question. I don't know. Was it a smart purchase? I don't know. I love that park. It's an awesome park. But I'm not sure that we'd have purchased that property had we known we were going to have the issues. But Ms. Yarborough told me that she estimates that there may have been as many as 700 vultures on our playgrounds, on that playground on any given day, that it was that many. It was that huge of a problem to our parks. So I also called Charleston County Attorney Natalie Ham because staff had told me that Charleston County was going to also have a development there close to this landfill. And she said, well, I've worked here for 2 years. It would be a very big surprise to me, but they would certainly run that through me. Let me get back with you. She checked with several people within their real estate. There are no plans and will not be any plans to purchase any property around this, area. I spoke with some other people at the county, a gentleman named Nathan Haynes that helps manage the landfill. And I asked him about that same property adjacent. And he said, well, that property, he said, there's been discussions with people about this, private discussions with private people about that. He said, the problem is when we have stormwater and we have bad storms, that's where our stormwater runs off. And you certainly wouldn't want to build on that site. So I said, well, how would this affect the sites that we're talking about? And he said, well, if you're going to build there, you better build it high, was his response. So there's the landfill issue. We also know that there's a Church Creek TIF issue. You know, if we buy this land, we're going to spend over $5 million and we're going to take away funding to improve Church Creek, which is as bad a situation as there is anywhere in the city of Charleston when it comes to flooding. People who live in Church Creek Basin have been flooded up to 3 times. They will flood again when the next storm comes, and we already know it. We've taken very little action. They said it was going to cost us $44 million to do it. That's why we created this TIF, was because it was going to cost $44 million. When we talked about this TIF, we talked about commercial development along Bees Ferry Road. Those TIF dollars, Councilman Bowden represents that area as well, are extremely important to our constituents. We need those tax dollars. We can't afford to take any tax dollars away. Plan West Ashley talks about the horrible traffic in this area, and that was several years ago. Some of the comments that I'm going to read came directly out of Plan West Ashley. We should shorten trips to new work locations. We should encourage the reuse of vacant sites with a complete mix of uses, including workspaces. That's what the original PUD on this does. It says that 84% of employed residents in West Ashley drive elsewhere to go to work, causing traffic issues. And it also states that there are no community scale retail and services in outer West Ashley. We do have a few now. We've got the Harris Teeter there, but it's certainly not serving the purpose. You walk in that Harris Teeter, you're going to stand in line. There is a huge demand. You walk in the Publix that's way down on 17, you're going to stand in line. You're not going to go right up to the counter and check out. There is a demand for more businesses in that area. It's just not a good purchase. I'm a proponent for affordable housing. I know it's needed. This is a bad purchase. It's a bad location to be in. So I'm going to vote no against this. I hope that all of you will vote no. Thank you.
Councilman Bowden, any comments? Yes.
Councilmember Gray, I want to also mention to council that this isn't a zone X, this particular parcel. So it's not in a flood zone. Thank you.
Councilman Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I made a mistake yesterday in real estate. We haven't seen the appraisal for this. So I would like to see an appraisal before we move this forward. I think that's part of our due diligence. So I move for a deferral until we can look at this appraisal.
I have the appraisal if council needs to see it. I quoted the value and I would just say 5,250,000. Very tight timeline because there is a PUD amendment that would be required with this. If I'd known council needed to actually see the appraisal, I would have included it. Glad to run and make copies so that we can address this accordingly. Thank you.
There's a motion to defer on the floor. Yes, Councilmember.
Yeah, look, every property purchase that I can recall that's come through real estate, we've seen an appraisal. So I think if we're going to purchase a piece of property, we should see an appraisal.
Was there a second? Okay. And deferral, takes. Yes. Councilmember Brady?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is in my district. I've had the opportunity to speak to constituents. I was actually going to read a.
You
text-
said it is in your district
It is in my district. that's
and
correct.
not, excuse me,
It will be.
it will be, okay.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
right. That's right. But I was going to read, this is an actual conversation that I had today. Are they actually planning on building some low-cost housing apartments right off Sanders and Bees Ferry? We would be against this, wouldn't we? If not, what's even the benefit? And so I explained, as that property is currently zoned, and this is kind of gets into the traffic argument, a private developer could put 280 housing units on that property right now. 20 units an acre. They could do that right now by right. We're purchasing this property and putting 124. So the traffic argument is somewhat disingenuous here because by us purchasing it, we're going to drop the number of units down by almost 160 for what could be done there. And so I said, the city's plan is to buy the property and put 124 affordable and attainable townhomes, some for rent and some for purchase, along with, and we talked about this in real estate, which was not mentioned earlier, with a commercial aspect, probably a small strip center, think coffee shop, cleaners, wine bar, something like that, that would go along there on Verdier Boulevard. My dad lives in the apartments, the avenues at Verdier. I would never want to put anything there that would, necessarily contribute to a downgrade in the quality of life there. And I don't think that this does. As Bees Ferry has been attracting more commercial activity, we need to make sure that people working in kind of the lower tier professional jobs and hospitality jobs can live where they work, which actually helps to reduce traffic as we're seeing in a commercial corridor. If you look at the adjusted median income for the area and what we're looking for on this property, the lowest end would be about $36,000, which the immediate thing for a single earner that popped into my mind was a teacher, right? That's about what an entry-level teacher makes. We have plenty of schools in this area in West Ashley. It would make sense that instead of having to live out in Somerville or Ladson, we would have them live near the schools, near Drayton Hall, near Stono Park, near West Ashley High School, near C.E. Williams. We would want them to be able to live near where they work. And then on the high end of it, it would be about $80,000. So think of, for a single earner, if you look at a mortgage would normally be, you qualify for 3 times your salary, give or take. So that'd be about $240,000. Well, there's not a house available in that area for $240,000, as we've seen from the median price of homes in the area. So even a worker who earns what we consider good money can't qualify for a house. So this is giving them the opportunity for an attached single or attached multifamily in a townhouse. They can get a start, get a leg up, and then be able to move on into some of the other neighborhoods in the area. And I would add, with the commercial corridor, the county has plans for, or they're developing, or there's a development going in over off Hunt Club Run in the county. And I mentioned it during real estate. There's going to be medical offices. There's going to be a Kick and Chicken going in there, which everyone was really excited about when that got announced by the news. But those folks need a place to live too. And if you think of what a bartender earns, what a server can earn, they would be able to qualify for these as well. So the benefit that you get was what I was telling this constituent, is that you get some workforce housing in a growing commercial corridor, some commercial development on that site rather than just purely residential. And also you reduce the amount of units that could otherwise be built. So in my mind, it's a win-win all the way around for that area. And it's putting it, there's a Carta stop up by the Walmart. You have access to the library. You have the multi-use path that runs down Bees Ferry, as Mr. Morgan mentioned. So the actual location here, as you can see, it's close to a lot of amenities, which is where we would want affordable housing. We don't want to put it where people automatically have to drive 5, 10, 15 miles to access services, to go to the grocery store, to go to the library, to drop a kid off at school. It makes sense that in this area, you would put that there. And I think, as I said, dropping the number of units compared to what could be built by right by the private sector there actually will reduce the burden, especially traffic wise for this corridor. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. Any other discussions? There's a motion to defer on the floor. Yes, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, so we're dropping the number of units. I mean, I mean, that's great, but why? I mean, we're purchasing land for the city of Charleston to make workforce housing, and we're going to build less units than are allowed. I'd like to know, I mean, if it makes money, it makes sense. I don't, what are we doing?
You make so much sense.
So Councilmember Parker, the initial schematic that was prepared for us by our engineering firm indicated based on what we typically do in affordable housing, 124 units. We may find that there is more, but we know with the types of funding that is typically used for affordable housing, those numbers fit with that scheme. And so again, it would help to meet that need, although it's not going to address that need in its entirety. It does get us a little bit further down the ball field, if you will.
And do you have the option of adding units later on if you
Sure.
wanted to?
Literally, she did this in about a week's time. Because for me, it was wanting to make sure in presenting this to you all, we could literally validate the per unit cost if we were paying $5.1 million. And it literally validates at 124. As we study this more, we would certainly look at whether we could increase it. But we limited what they would do until we knew we were going to buy it, because we don't want to spend money on pre-development costs until we know we're actually going to acquire it. And so part of our due diligence beyond council's approval would be to further study the site, get the PUD amendment started, to look at a geotech, to also pull a phase one. Because if those items don't pan out, we would literally have to move away from this site anyway. But this is one of the first steps that we take to facilitate acquisition. Then we move forward, and we have a due diligence period that goes through October.
And you have a mix of incomes. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. So typically with your rental now, you're looking at up to 80% because the State Housing Finance and Development Organization, who administers tax credits, allows you to do income averaging, which means you have a mixed 50, 60, 70, 80% thresholds in the rental development. In the for sale, we would go to persons at the 120 AMI range for those first-time home buyer opportunities.
And isn't there a tipping point in terms of affordable units versus market rate units, that if you have a certain number of affordable units that can affect the marketability of the market rate or homeownership unit?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but
Let me give an example.
Okay.
I think generally, if a complex exceeds, let's say 40% lower income, that's oftentimes considered the tipping point, which would then affect the other units that might be market.
Yes, sir. And that is why I think state housing went to the income averaging formula to allow for higher rental rate units, along with those that might be at the 50% threshold, to also allow for greater profitability, thus greater success in being able to maintain and sustain those units.
Councilmember Bowden, right? Oh, I'm sorry, the mayor was before you, then that's Sheila. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to just note that part of the discussion here belies the fact that the availability of properties for affordable housing development is pretty limited in the city. This is a property we brought to you. Bridge Commercial has been working for us for how long? A year? They've been a lot of properties we haven't brought to you. Because I think y'all know the real estate market well enough to know that there's not an abundance of available properties out there that make sense for this style of development. I believe this is one of them. I hear Councilmember Shealy loud and clear, and I would like during our due diligence period to drill down a little further about the birds and the wildlife in the area. I've seen the vultures out at, the park out there. They're real. I walked the property and drove all around it myself. There's, single family residential being developed, literally right all behind it, that whole line behind it, and where you see that red dotted line. So I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary when I was over there. We could certainly study that further during the due diligence. About the density, you know, we do want to have that mixture of for sale product in addition to rental. So you can get more density if you pack 3 or 4 story apartment buildings as opposed to having townhouses that you're selling for home ownership. So that does have a little impact on the amount of product that you could develop on it. And I did want to point out to everyone that, for what it's worth, there is like a little buffer between Bees Ferry Road and the residential, portion of the property. There's the bike, sidewalk facility, as Mr. Morgan mentioned. And then there is a, power easement that kind of runs parallel to Bees Ferry Road. You can see it right along here. So the development does get set back, if you will, and have a buffer from Bees Ferry Road to where the units would be. And then, as I mentioned, you can see just kind of lightly drawn in here, there's single family lots built all along the back of the property. So it certainly is in keeping with the neighboring property. And I do think it's important, as I mentioned yesterday at the meeting, that some commercial development occur on Verdier Drive, particularly this parcel right up close to the light at Verdier and Bees Ferry, which right across from there is where Sanders Road is. So I would respectfully, I know the question on the floor right now is defer. And if we do defer, then we can drill down on all this information a little more and bring it back to you. If we were to move forward, it is just a matter of going into due diligence at this point. And I'd be happy to offer to council that we, if y'all would like to, are willing to proceed, that we do our due diligence and come back to you one more time to ask for approval before we actually have a closing on the property and go hard on the contract.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor to defer. It's been properly seconded. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Just really quick, especially if it's going to come back in front of us, I want to make sure I'm getting some questions answered. So we could potentially add some residential units. That's great. What about if we, build this out and it's going even better than we hoped, and we've got a little extra room out there? Could we add commercial space? Like, could we sell a portion of this and add commercial space?
Personally, I think that the portion along Verdier, there's possibly on either side of this road here, it comes out to there, but there's no light there. So this area is the preferred commercial development side, in my opinion.
We have.
And if I could add, so the PUD amendment would be coming to you also, assuming if this is approved tonight, it would be going to our planning commission in August. It would be coming to you in September, where all those kind of details would be worked out. The one thing about, when you do put in commercial, of course, it requires a good bit of parking and things like that. So, there has to be a balance, but that's certainly something we could look at during that PUD amendment process.
Okay, and then the only other thing is I'd be interested to know when we come back, kind of sounds like that's what's going to happen here. If we go through with the zoning rewrite that we've talked about, what will this area be in the future? Is this going to be, because I've heard the flooding concerns, obviously that's, anytime we mention something in Outer West Ashley, that's going to be my chief concern. So
just like maybe a little bit more information about that.
Sure. And so because of the elevation that's on this site, it actually, it's, as Ms. Johnson was saying, it is, in the X zone. And it's not in our comprehensive plans, low impact and conserved areas. There are lots of areas in Bees Ferry that are, lots of them, but this area is not. And so it is in what we call our neighborhood edge, which allows for up to 20 units an acre. What's being proposed here is about 9 units an acre, that kind of thing. So it's well within the comprehensive plans recommendations for this site.
I think it's wearing thin.
I voted against this and planning for a number of reasons. And we're gonna defer it, so I won't go into all those reasons. I'm gonna support the deferral. But what I would ask for, Councilman Brady brought up a good point, you know, school teachers. I saw a list of properties that the Realtors Association had that's owned by Charleston County School District, 5-6 acre tracts that would be good for affordable housing. I think we should look into partnering with the Charleston County School District on lands that's already owned by taxpayers for possible affordable housing. They have a number of locations around, in particular Charleston County, City of Charleston, some in, some out. And as far as properties being out, does anybody know where the largest affordable housing development is in the town of Mount Pleasant? It's ours. That's right.
Mhm.
We've owned it about 40 years.
On Bank Street.
On Bank Street, okay? So in the town of Mount Pleasant, off of Coleman Boulevard, very nice complex. So the City of Charleston Housing Authority has led affordable housing for decades in Mount Pleasant. So that complex actually is in the city of Charleston. So why not partner with Charleston County School Districts, not only on one site, but a number of sites? 5 million, instead of going towards the land, could go towards construction and development. A second entity that owns a number of parcels is Charleston County. Charleston County owns a number of parcels that's available with agreement, of course, with partnership, of course. Doing all these things in silos makes it more difficult to be able to do it. Land costs is somewhere between 15 and 20% in any development, depending on location. The mayor knows that. He's a commercial realtor at heart. If we can eliminate some of the most successful affordable housing developments that we have in this city, Williams Terrace, Canterbury House, the land cost was free. It's owned by a tax exempt entity, and the profit motive is not there. We have this process where we had one realtor that was looking for land for us. So we left that realtor, and now we would bridge commercial. I mean, I just think we ought to open that up to thousands of realtors. If they knew we're looking for affordable housing, why don't we have an RFQ? Let's involve the Realtor Association. I understand the cost of land, but we are not casting our net wide enough to secure properties. By the time we paid 5.1 or 2 million for this property, you know, our piggy bank is going to be severely depleted. We will still have a few million left, but not a whole bunch. So I think if we're going to defer this, let's also get some other suggestions in the mix. We meet once a month, so we got 30 days to get some other suggestions in the mix from county council, as far as lands owned by them, from the school district, as far as lands owned by them. So that's my comments, but I'm gonna support the deferral.
But I think on the latter, I think we had already discussed trying to identify land that the school owns. And to try to get them, like other cities are doing, to also get into affordable housing business for teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So I agree with you. I think that's something that we need to really, Mayor, start talking a little more directly with the school board to see whether or not they would sort of mimic ideas that are going on all across the country. Sorry.
I'll defer to the mayor.
Yes, I think you were next, right? Yes,
Uh,
Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so, look, I have great concern about locating this development as close as it is to a landfill, just because there's another development going very close to the Charleston County landfill doesn't mean that we should also do the same thing. I work on landfills for a living, and they're not nice places. And that landfill is Councilman Shealy mentioned, is a really bad one. I just have great concern that putting affordable housing there is going to result in a lot of unhappy residents. And I think we can do better for those that need this affordable housing.
Yes. Gianna.
Sure, thank you.
Ms.
And
Shaw
so,
Johnson.
Councilmember Waring, we do not work in silos. I have a direct line to Jeff Baroe, who is the COO of the school district. We've had many conversations more recently about properties that they own, as well as with Christine Durant, who is the deputy county manager regarding properties they own. In fact, I sat on their review committee for their ARPA funds, and they are looking at strategies right now. They have 18 sites that me and my team visited a few weeks ago. Most of those are in the county, only 1 or 2 were in the city, but we are consistently, in addition to looking for larger tracts of land, are also doing infill opportunities. We're working with Charleston Habitat to build 3 units on Harriet. We are working with the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation as well to build 2 more east side, 2 more west side. So we're actually facilitating that. And I can bring to council, if you desire, the list of properties that the Bridge Commercial team has brought forward over the last year and a half. Easily 20 or more. And it is, to the mayor's earlier point, very expensive. One site, in fact, I reached out to Matt Froelich and members of our team to see if we could jointly buy a site because the cost was $8 million. But literally, we are not seeing prices much lower than what we're presenting to you this evening. When we purchased, if you recall, the Fenwick site on Johns Island, we closed on that in 2018. That was about 3.5 million. And so to say this one, and that was 12 acres, 10 high. This is 5.1 million several years later. That is a larger tract of land. And the price is just slightly higher than what we paid for then. So we've been quite diligent about our efforts to bring forth property. Hence this one tonight. We honestly thought that this was one that we could look at and seriously consider. And I would add to the earlier deferral that we are having copies made for you of the appraisal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, let me respond. I appreciate the conversations that you're having, Ms. Shaw Johnson. When you come forward with the list from Bridgepoint, could you come forward with the list of properties that the school district owns? And if you could, inquire with the county to see what properties that they have that possibly the city of Charleston and the county could collaborate on for affordable housing. If you can come back with those lists of properties, then I think we have some good choices to review. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any more discussion on this deferral? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes. You want to do a roll call?
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Mr.
Councilman
Chairman,
Mitchell, yeah.
do you want me to do a roll?
Please,
Okay.
thank you.
Councilmember Gregg. Councilmember Shealy.
Aye.
Councilmember Saccharin.
Nay.
Councilmember Brady. I'm sorry, Councilmember Mitchell. Councilmember Brady. Councilmember Gregory.
Aye.
Councilmember Waring. Councilmember Seekings. And Councilmember Shade is absent. Councilmember Bowden. Councilmember Appel. Councilmember Parker.
Aye.
The
Mayor
ayes.
Tecklenburg.
You said nay.
All right, the motion
Uh,
carries.
The ayes have it. And before we adjourn, just bear with me for a second. There are a couple of things. The first is, we have 3 board members from the IM. And I think we need to applaud Councilman Appel, Councilman Waring, and the chairman, and the chairman, of course, Wilbur. And the mayor. I'm sorry, Mayor, because you did a good job on the. I just think that, they did such an exceptional job of pulling together what I think was a worldwide opening for a worldwide museum. And I think we need to sometimes thank our own. And finally, we are about to do the groundbreaking for the Emmanuel 9 Memorial. Some of you did receive an email, but just in case you haven't opened it or seen it, that groundbreaking is on this Saturday at 12 o'clock in front of the church. We have a mock-up of how the benches for the memorial will look. It's unbelievable. And you'll get a sense of the enormity of the task to memorialize the Emmanuel 9. So please, if you get a chance on Saturday, come out. We also have a service at 10 where we'll also be celebrating the return of our 100-year-old organ at the church. We've finally gotten that completed as well. So you're all invited, okay? Thank you. If there's nothing else to come before this committee, this meeting's adjourned, and we're going to be here a while tonight, I can tell.
Wait for a 5-minute